Two strange bags were found at the door of the shelter. When the volunteers decided to open them, they couldn't believe their eyes. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The night was dark and heavy with rain, the kind of downpour that muffled the usual sounds of the city. A bitter wind whipped through the empty streets, rattling the windows of the small, aging building that housed Angel's Haven, a private shelter on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. The shelter had been running for years, providing refuge for abandoned children, a safe haven for those society had cast aside. Inside the dimly lit office, Anna Keller, the director of the shelter, sat at her desk, rubbing her temples. It had been another long day. She had just finished reviewing case files when she heard a sound, faint, almost lost beneath the rain. At first, she dismissed it as the wind, but there it was again. A weak, muffled cry. Anna frowned, standing up. She wrapped her cardigan tightly around herself and moved toward the front door. Outside, the porch light flickered unsteadily. The sound was coming from just beyond the threshold. When she opened the door, her breath hitched. Two large, tightly sealed canvas bags sat on the doorstep, drenched from the rain. For a moment, she hesitated. Who would leave something like this? Donations were usually dropped off during the day and never in this condition. She stepped forward, heart pounding, and crouched beside the nearest bag. That was when she heard it again, the sound that made her blood run cold, a soft, barely audible whimper. Anna's hands trembled as she yanked at the knot securing the first bag. The rain made the fabric slick, but she pried it open with desperate urgency. Inside, wrapped in an old, damp blanket, was a baby. A little boy, no older than a few months, with flushed, chubby cheeks and wide, terrified eyes. Anna sucked in a shaky breath. She turned to the second bag, nearly tearing the fabric in her haste. Inside was another infant, a girl, smaller than the boy, with dark tufts of hair sticking to her forehead. Her tiny hands curled into weak fists, her lips trembling. Anna gasped, pulling both infants into her arms, shielding them from the cold as she stood on the porch. Rain poured down around her, soaking through her sweater, but she barely noticed. Then something else caught her eye. A small, crumpled piece of paper had been stuffed inside the second bag. With one hand, she fished it out, unfolding it carefully despite the dampness. The message was brief, written in unsteady handwriting. "I'm sorry. This is the only way." Anna's heart clenched. The words swirled in her mind as she rushed back inside, closing the door behind her. She moved quickly, laying the babies on a soft blanket in the lounge area, checking their tiny fingers, their faces. They were cold, but not freezing. Someone had abandoned them, yes, but they hadn't been left to die. Whoever had done this had wanted them to be found. She reached for the phone, her fingers still shaking as she dialed 911. "This is Anna Keller from Angel's Haven," she said when the dispatcher answered. "I need emergency services at my shelter. 2 abandoned infants. I don't know how long they've been outside, but they need medical attention." The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way. Anna hung up, forcing herself to breathe. The little boy let out a soft whimper, and she gently stroked his forehead, offering what little comfort she could. "You're safe now," she murmured. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed outside the shelter. 2 police cars and an ambulance arrived, their sirens cutting through the night. Paramedics hurried inside, bringing warmth and professionalism into the tense atmosphere. One of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, knelt beside the babies, checking their vitals. "They're cold, but stable," she announced. "We'll need to take them to the hospital for a full checkup." Anna nodded, relief washing over her. Meanwhile, Detective Evan Rogers stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. He was in his late 30s, sharp-eyed with the weary expression of a man who had seen too much. "Miss Keller?" he asked. Anna straightened. "Yes, I found them on the doorstep about 20 minutes ago." "You didn't see who left them?" She shook her head. "No, but this was in the bag with them." She handed him the crumpled note. Evan read it in silence, his expression unreadable. "We'll check the security footage," he said. "Is there a camera facing the entrance?" Anna hesitated. "There is, but it's been acting up. The storm might have knocked it out." Evan sighed. "Of course it did." He turned back to the babies, watching as the paramedics carefully placed them in warm, insulated blankets. "Do they have names?" he asked. Anna swallowed. "Not yet." Evan studied the infants for a moment, then looked back at Anna. "Once they're cleared by the hospital, they'll be placed in protective custody. You'll be informed of any developments." Anna nodded. The paramedics prepared to transport the babies. Just before they left, the little girl let out a soft, hiccuping cry, her tiny hand grasping the fabric of Anna's sleeve. For some reason, it felt like an anchor. As the doors of the ambulance closed, Anna stood motionless, watching the vehicle disappear into the night. The storm had begun to ease, but the weight in her chest remained. Someone had loved these babies enough to ensure they were found. Someone had also been desperate enough to leave them behind, and somewhere out there the truth was waiting to be uncovered. The rain had finally stopped by the time Anna Keller locked the front door of Angel's Haven. The night air was still damp, carrying the lingering scent of wet pavement and autumn leaves. Inside the shelter, the dim glow of the office lamp cast long shadows on the walls. The silence felt heavier now. The babies were gone, taken to the hospital for evaluation, and with them, the frantic urgency of the past hour had faded, leaving behind a quiet unease. Anna sat at her desk, staring at the crumpled note in her hand. She had read it a dozen times already, though it contained so few words. "I'm sorry. This is the only way." The ink was slightly smudged, as if written in haste, or maybe with a shaken hand. She traced the letters with her fingertip, wondering about the person who had left it behind. A mother? A father? Someone else entirely? Whoever they were, they had vanished into the night, leaving behind two lives they had once been responsible for. A knock at the office door broke her thoughts. She looked up to see Detective Evan Rogers standing in the doorway, his coat damp from the rain. His expression was unreadable, but there was a certain heaviness in his stance, as if he already knew this case would not be simple. "We checked the front entrance camera," he said, stepping inside. "It cut out for about 15 minutes before you found the babies. Looks like someone knew exactly where to leave them." Anna felt her stomach tighten. "You think it was intentional? That they avoided the camera on purpose?" Evan nodded, pulling out a notepad. "It wasn't a coincidence. Whoever did this knew the area, knew the building, and knew how to avoid being seen." He paused, watching her carefully. "Do you get a lot of abandoned children here?" Anna sighed, rubbing her temples. "It's happened before. Usually, it's infants, sometimes toddlers, but never like this. Not in sealed bags, not in the middle of the night during a storm." Evan jotted something down. "You mentioned hearing them crying. If you hadn't gone outside when you did, do you think they would have made it through the night?" Anna shivered at the thought. "I don't know. It wasn't freezing, but they were already cold when I brought them inside. A few more hours in the rain." She trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. Evan tapped his pen against his notepad, deep in thought. "The note, may I?" She handed it to him. He studied it for a moment, frowning. No signature, no names, just an apology. He flipped it over, as if expecting something more. "We'll send it to the lab, see if we can pull any fingerprints or DNA from it." "Do you think the parents will come forward?" Anna asked. Evan hesitated. "Maybe, if they regret it. But if they went through all this trouble to disappear, I doubt they'll make it easy to find them." Anna swallowed hard. "And the babies? What happens now?" "They'll stay at the hospital overnight. Once they're medically cleared, Child Protective Services will take over. If no relatives come forward, they'll go through the foster system." He studied her expression. "Unless your shelter files for temporary guardianship." Anna stiffened. "That's an option?" "It is. The system is overcrowded. If a stable environment is available, social services may place them here until a long-term solution is found." Anna exhaled, glancing toward the empty cribs in the nursery. The thought of those babies being shuffled between strangers, passed from one overburdened foster home to another, made her chest tighten. Angel's Haven wasn't meant for long-term care, but it was still better than the alternative. Before she could answer, Evan's radio crackled. He stepped aside, listening to the transmission. His expression darkened. "Got it. I'm on my way." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Something new?" "A possible lead." He tucked the note into his pocket. "A security camera 2 blocks away caught someone walking in the rain around the time the babies were abandoned. Hood up, face down. We're pulling footage now." Anna's pulse quickened. "Do you think it's the person who left them?" "Could be. Or just a random pedestrian." He glanced towards the door. "Either way, I'll let you know if we find anything." As Evan left, Anna remained seated at her desk, staring at the darkened window. The weight of the night pressed against her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly helpless. Somewhere out there, a mother or father had made the impossible decision to leave their children behind. And somewhere out there, that same person was still watching, waiting, wondering if they had done the right thing. The next morning, Angel's Haven was alive with the usual routine. Breakfast was served in the communal dining area, the younger children still groggy from sleep as they pushed cereal around in their bowls. The older kids, the ones who had learned how to navigate the foster system and the uncertainty of their futures, ate in silence, lost in their own thoughts. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the scent of damp pavement and earth. Anna Keller moved through the halls, her mind still caught in the events of the previous night. The image of the 2 babies, cold and frightened, would not leave her. She had barely slept, waiting for a call from the hospital with updates. At just past 8, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up immediately. "This is Dr. Harris from St. Mary's," a calm voice said on the other end. "I'm calling about the 2 infants brought in last night." Anna gripped the phone tighter. "How are they?" "They're stable. The little girl had some mild dehydration, but nothing serious. The boy seems perfectly healthy. No signs of malnourishment or abuse. Whoever cared for them before, they weren't neglectful. They just—" The doctor hesitated. "Just what?" Anna pressed. "They were careful, but desperate. The way the babies were bundled up, the fact that they had been recently fed before being left, it doesn't match the profile of abandonment out of cruelty. Someone loved them. They just couldn't keep them." Anna felt her throat tighten. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made it even harder to process. What happens now? We're keeping them for observation for another 24 hours. After that, CPS takes over. Anna closed her eyes. Unless I apply for temporary guardianship. There was a pause on the other end. That would be an option, yes. But it's a commitment, Miss Keller, even if it's temporary. Anna knew that all too well. She had run Angel's Haven for over a decade, had seen children come and go, had watched them struggle, thrive, or disappear into the bureaucracy of the system. Taking in 2 infants wasn't just a logistical challenge, it was an emotional one. "I'll talk to my staff," she finally said, "and I'll be at the hospital this afternoon." She ended the call and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. 2 babies. No names, no past, no one coming for them. But for now, they had her. By midday, the shelter had settled into its usual rhythm. Anna found herself in the nursery, standing near the empty cribs that should have been occupied. The younger children who had once slept in them had either been adopted or placed in foster care. Some had been lucky. Others, not so much. She turned when she heard a soft knock on the door frame. It was Maggie, one of the senior caregivers at the shelter. She was in her 50s, with short, silver-streaked hair and the no-nonsense attitude of someone who had spent her life taking care of others. "Heard from the hospital?" Maggie asked, folding her arms. Anna nodded. "They're fine, healthy. They'll be released tomorrow." Maggie studied her. "And?" Anna exhaled. "And if we want them here, we have to file for guardianship." Maggie was quiet for a moment, then she sighed. 2 babies, Anna. That's a lot. I know. We don't have a full-time infant care program. We handle temporary placements, older kids, not newborns. I know. Maggie hesitated. But you want to do it anyway. Anna looked at her, tired but resolute. They were left on our doorstep, Maggie. That has to mean something. Maggie sighed again, softer this time. It's not just about logistics, you know that. It's about what happens when they have to leave. That was the real issue. It wasn't just the sleepless nights, the feeding schedules, the extra hands they would need to care for 2 infants. It was the inevitable attachment, the painful reality that one day they would have to say goodbye. Anna swallowed. I'd rather them be here, with people who care, than lost in the system. Maggie studied her for a long moment, then nodded. I'll call in some extra help. We'll make it work. Relief flooded through Anna, but it was quickly followed by another wave of anxiety. This was just the first step. There were legal hurdles to clear, CPS evaluations to pass, funding to secure. And beyond all of that, there was still the lingering question, who had left them, and why? By late afternoon, Anna was on her way to the hospital. The sky had cleared, the sunlight streaming through the windshield as she pulled into the parking lot of St. Mary's. She checked in at the front desk and was directed to the pediatric ward. When she stepped into the room, her breath caught. The babies were in separate cribs, their tiny bodies swaddled in warm blankets. The little boy, James, she thought, was sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. The girl, Lucy, was awake, staring up at the ceiling, her dark eyes wide and unblinking. Anna approached her crib slowly. Lucy turned her head, her gaze locking onto Anna's. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, without warning, Lucy let out a soft, hiccuping cry, her tiny fingers curling toward the air. Anna felt something in her chest tighten, something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. She reached down and gently touched Lucy's hand. "You're safe now," she whispered. She wasn't sure if she was saying it for Lucy or for herself. The hospital discharged the infants the next afternoon. Anna had spent the morning finalizing the paperwork for temporary guardianship, working closely with the social worker assigned to their case. There had been some resistance. Angel's Haven was not a typical foster home, and taking in infants required additional resources. But with her reputation, years of experience, and a carefully laid out plan, she had convinced them. James and Lucy would stay at the shelter, for now. As she walked through the hospital corridors toward the pediatric ward, Anna felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that the babies were healthy, that they had a temporary place to stay. Anxiety because she knew this was only the beginning. She entered the nursery and found James asleep in his crib, his tiny fingers curled into loose fists. Lucy, as usual, was awake. Her dark eyes followed Anna as she approached, quiet but alert. A nurse met her at the bedside, holding a clipboard. "They're all set. The social worker will check in within the week, but for now, they're officially in your care." Anna nodded, glancing at Lucy, then James. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, but she pushed it aside. Right now, they needed stability. They needed comfort. As she carefully lifted James into her arms, he stirred slightly but didn't wake. His small body was warm against her, a fragile bundle of life that had been discarded yet somehow found safety. Lucy, still watching, let out a small whimper but didn't cry. Anna reached down, gently stroking the girl's cheek. "Soon," she murmured, "let's get you home." By the time they arrived at Angel's Haven, Maggie had set up a space in the nursery for the babies. Cribs, blankets, formula, everything they would need, at least for now. Other staff members had helped rearrange the space, turning what had once been an area for toddlers into something better suited for infants. James was still asleep as Anna placed him into the crib, carefully tucking a blanket around him. Lucy, on the other hand, was restless, her small fingers clenching and unclenching. Anna knew it would take time for her to feel secure. She barely had a moment to breathe before the front doorbell rang. It was Caroline and Tom Harris. Anna had been expecting them. The couple had been on the adoption waiting list for over a year. She had met them several times, had seen the longing in their eyes every time they visited the shelter. They wanted a child more than anything, and they had already expressed interest in James. She led them inside to the office, where they sat nervously across from her. Caroline was in her early 30s, with soft brown hair and kind eyes. Tom, a few years older, had the look of someone who had spent too many nights wondering if he would ever be a father. "Thank you for coming," Anna began. Caroline clasped her hands together. "We heard about the babies, the ones left at the shelter." Anna nodded. "They're both doing well, but I know you were looking for an infant, and I think James might be a good match." Tom leaned forward. "We'd love to meet him." There was hesitation in his voice, as if he didn't dare to hope. Anna understood. She stood. "Come with me." The nursery was quiet when they entered. James was still sleeping, peaceful in his crib. Lucy was lying awake, but for once, she wasn't crying, just staring, as if she understood that something was about to change. Caroline let out a soft breath when she saw James. "He's beautiful." Anna watched as Caroline moved closer, hesitantly reaching down to touch his tiny hand. James stirred but didn't wake. Tom stood beside her, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched his son for the first time. Anna had seen this moment before. the way a parent recognizes their child even before the papers are signed, the way love settles in before words can be spoken. Caroline wiped at her eyes. What happens next? Anna smiled. You start the paperwork, and if everything goes well, you take him home. The process wasn't immediate. The next few weeks were filled with meetings, interviews, home visits. Anna made sure James was placed in the right hands, that Caroline and Tom were ready. And they were, more than ready. Then, one evening, the day finally came. Caroline arrived at the shelter with a brand new car seat, her face glowing with anticipation. Tom followed close behind, carrying a soft blue blanket. They had spent hours preparing their home, setting up a nursery, buying tiny clothes, reading books on parenting. Anna lifted James from his crib for the last time. He had grown in the few weeks he had spent at the shelter, his cheeks fuller, his tiny fingers stronger. As she passed him into Caroline's arms, she felt a familiar ache in her chest, the bittersweet joy of watching a child leave. Caroline cradled James close, whispering something soft against his forehead. Tom rested a hand on her shoulder, his eyes shining. "Thank you," he said to Anna, "for everything." Anna nodded. "Take care of him." As they left, Lucy stirred in her crib. Anna turned toward her, kneeling beside the crib as the door closed behind the Harris family. Lucy's dark eyes stared up at her, quiet, waiting. "You're not alone," Anna whispered, stroking her tiny hand. "We'll find your place, too." But, as she watched the empty doorway, she couldn't shake the feeling that Lucy's journey was going to be much harder. The nursery felt quieter after James was gone. The absence of his tiny, rhythmic breaths, the small sounds he made in his sleep, left an emptiness that settled deep into the walls of Angel's Haven. Lucy, as if sensing the loss, had become even more restless. She cried more often now, not in loud wails, but in soft, broken whimpers that tugged at Anna's heart. At first, she thought it was just an adjustment period. Babies could feel change, even if they didn't understand it. Maybe Lucy missed the warmth of another body beside her. Maybe she had become accustomed to James's presence. But as days turned into weeks, Anna started to notice something else. Lucy wasn't just unsettled. She was withdrawing. She rarely reached for the caregivers the way James had. When someone picked her up, she would stiffen before finally relaxing, as if she had to convince herself she was safe. She slept in short bursts, waking up frequently, her dark eyes wide and searching. Anna had seen this before. Children who had been abandoned, even as infants, carried that loss with them. Some learned to trust again quickly. Others, like Lucy, held on to the fear for a long time. Maggie was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "She's waiting," she said one evening as they sat in the nursery, Lucy dozing in Anna's arms. "She thinks someone is coming back for her." Anna looked down at the baby, her tiny fingers curled against the fabric of Anna's sweater. She had seen older kids cling to hope, convince themselves that their parents would return, that this was all temporary. But for an infant, could Lucy really be waiting? "She doesn't know anything else," Anna murmured. "Whoever left her, they were her whole world." Maggie sighed. "I just hope she finds another one." The process of placing Lucy into a family began almost immediately. The demand for infants in the foster and adoption system was high, and social services had already received interest. Several families had come to visit, eager to meet the baby girl with the soft, dark hair and solemn eyes. But something always went wrong. The first woman, a single mother in her 40s, had seemed perfect on paper. Stable job, a quiet home, plenty of resources. She had come into the nursery with gentle hands and kind eyes, cooing softly as she lifted Lucy into her arms. Lucy had screamed. Not the fussy cries of a tired infant, not the hungry, restless whimpers Anna had grown used to. This was full-bodied terror, her tiny limbs stiff, her mouth open in a wail so raw it had sent shivers through the room. The woman had tried to soothe her, bouncing gently, speaking in a low, reassuring voice. But Lucy's cries only grew worse, her small hands clutching at the air as if searching for something familiar. By the time the woman left, she looked shaken. I don't think I'm the right fit," she had said, placing Lucy back into Anna's arms. "She needs someone else." Anna had tried to tell her that it wasn't personal, that Lucy was just scared, but she had already made up her mind. The next visit wasn't much better. A young couple, newly married, had been eager to adopt. They had already gone through all the background checks, had decorated a nursery in pastel colors, had spent months preparing for the right child. But when they held Lucy, she had gone eerily silent. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She simply stared at them with wide, unblinking eyes, her body tense, her breath shallow. It was as if she had shut down entirely. Anna had never seen a baby react that way before. The couple had stayed for nearly an hour, doing everything they could to coax a reaction out of her. But Lucy remained frozen, locked in whatever fear had gripped her tiny body. The couple had left, apologizing, clearly heartbroken. One by one, the families stopped coming. Some had other options. Some simply didn't feel a connection. Others, perhaps sensing something fragile in Lucy, something that might take too long to heal, weren't willing to take the risk. Anna watched as time after time Lucy was passed over. Time after time, she was left behind. One evening, Anna sat in the nursery, rocking Lucy in her arms. The baby had finally fallen asleep after hours of restlessness. Her breathing was slow and steady now, her face peaceful. Maggie sat nearby, watching quietly. Maybe she just needs more time. Anna nodded, but she wasn't sure time was the answer. "She's scared," she said softly. "She doesn't know who to trust. She trusts you." Anna looked down at the sleeping baby. Lucy's tiny fingers had curled into the fabric of her shirt, holding on even in sleep. "She has to trust someone else," Anna murmured. "I can't be the only one." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Days turned into weeks. The weather grew colder, the air crisp with the scent of approaching winter. Lucy remained at Angel's Haven, still waiting for a home, still struggling to connect. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. Anna had been in her office when Maggie knocked on the door, her expression unreadable. "There's someone here to see Lucy," she said. Anna sighed, exhausted from disappointment after disappointment. "Who is it?" Maggie hesitated. "You should come see for yourself." Anna followed her down the hall, past the playroom where older children were drawing, past the dining area where a volunteer was setting up snacks. She stepped into the nursery and stopped short. Standing by Lucy's crib was Elizabeth Morgan. Anna blinked, surprised. Dr. Morgan had been one of the pediatricians who had examined Lucy at the hospital after she was found. She had been professional, efficient, kind, but Anna hadn't expected to see her here. Elizabeth turned when she heard Anna enter. "I heard Lucy was still here," she said simply. Anna glanced at Lucy, who was watching Elizabeth carefully from her crib. She wasn't crying. She wasn't frozen. She was just observing. "You're here to see her?" Anna asked. Elizabeth nodded. "I've been thinking about her since the night she was brought in. I told myself it wasn't my place. that someone else would take her, but she exhaled, shaking her head. No one has, have they? Anna didn't answer. She didn't need to. Elizabeth turned back to Lucy. Slowly, she reached out a hand, not to pick her up, just to offer. Lucy stared at it for a long moment. Then, to Anna's shock, she reached out and took it. It was the first time Lucy had willingly reached for anyone besides Anna. Anna felt something shift, something she hadn't let herself hope for. Maybe Lucy had been waiting, but maybe she had been waiting for the right person. Anna stood in the nursery doorway, watching as Lucy's tiny fingers curled around Dr. Elizabeth Morgan's outstretched hand. The moment was quiet, almost delicate, but it carried a weight Anna could feel deep in her chest. For weeks, Lucy had recoiled from strangers, stiffened in unfamiliar arms, or retreated into herself. But now she was reaching out. Elizabeth didn't move too quickly. She let Lucy hold on to her finger, let the baby set the pace. There was something steady and patient in the way she interacted with her, a kind of unspoken understanding. Anna stepped forward, careful not to disrupt whatever fragile connection was forming. "She doesn't do that often," she said softly. Elizabeth glanced at her but didn't pull away from Lucy. "I figured." Anna studied her for a moment. The doctor had always struck her as composed, analytical, yet there was something more here, something personal. "You've been thinking about her," Anna said. It wasn't a question. Elizabeth exhaled, finally straightening. "I have." Anna motioned towards the chairs near the crib, and they both sat. Lucy, surprisingly, didn't cry when Elizabeth moved her hand away, though her dark eyes followed the doctor's every movement. "I wasn't expecting you to come here," Anna admitted. Elizabeth gave a small, almost self-conscious smile. "Neither was I." She glanced down at Lucy. When she came into the hospital that night, something about her stuck with me. I see a lot of abandoned children in my line of work, more than I'd like to admit. Most of them, they're either too young to understand what's happening, or they adjust quickly, latching on to the next person who cares for them. She paused. But Lucy wasn't like that. Anna nodded. No, she wasn't. She wasn't just afraid. She was waiting. Anna felt a chill at the words. She had thought the same thing for weeks. That's exactly what Maggie said. Elizabeth smiled faintly. Maggie's perceptive. For a while, they sat in silence, watching Lucy. She had dozed off, her tiny hand resting against the edge of the crib. Her breathing was slow and even. Elizabeth finally spoke again. "I have an adult daughter," she said, almost hesitantly. "She's in college now. I was young when I had her, not as young as Lucy's mother probably was, but young enough that people had doubts." Anna listened, sensing there was more. "I raised her on my own. I didn't have a safety net, didn't have a lot of support at first. I remember being terrified that I'd made a mistake, that I wasn't enough." Elizabeth looked down. "But I was lucky. I had people who believed in me, who helped when I didn't know what I was doing, and I made it work." Anna studied her carefully. "You're thinking about taking her in." Elizabeth didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned forward, resting her arms on her knees. "I don't make impulsive decisions. It's not in my nature. But I can't get her out of my head, and that means something." Anna knew exactly what she meant. She had seen it before. This quiet certainty, this pull that some people felt towards certain children. It wasn't something that could be forced. It was either there or it wasn't. "You'd be starting over," Anna said. Elizabeth gave a soft laugh. "I know." "It's not just about love. It's late-night feedings, teething, fevers, tantrums. I know. You've built your life, your career. Are you ready to change everything?" Elizabeth looked at Lucy, who was still sleeping peacefully. "I don't know if anyone is ever really ready, but I know what it feels like to be alone and scared. And I know I can give her something better." Anna sat back, exhaling. It wasn't her decision to make, but a part of her felt something close to relief. "She's going to fight it," Anna warned. "She doesn't trust easily." Elizabeth smiled. "Neither did my daughter at first." There it was again, that quiet confidence, that certainty. Anna nodded. "Then let's start the process." The next few weeks were filled with paperwork, meetings, home visits. Elizabeth had to undergo the same scrutiny as any prospective foster parent. Background checks, financial evaluations, psychological assessments. Anna had seen good people struggle under the weight of it, but Elizabeth handled everything with the same calm precision she brought to her medical practice. The first supervised visits went well. Elizabeth came to the shelter almost every evening, spending time with Lucy. She never rushed her, never forced affection. Instead, she sat with her, spoke to her in a soft voice, offered her gentle touches when Lucy seemed ready. And slowly, Lucy responded. She still cried when unfamiliar people held her, but she stopped crying when Elizabeth did. She started reaching for her, gripping onto her sleeve when she was near. The moment that cemented everything came during one of the evening visits. Elizabeth was holding Lucy, swaying gently when Anna saw it happen. Lucy, who had been staring at her with those big, cautious eyes, let out a tiny sound, something between a sigh and a hum. Then she rested her head against Elizabeth's chest. It was the first time she had done that with anyone but Anna. Elizabeth's arms tightened slightly, and Anna saw the way she closed her eyes for just a second, as if grounding herself in the moment. That was it. Lucy had chosen her. On the day Lucy officially left Angel's Haven, the staff gathered to say goodbye. The older children, who had grown used to seeing Lucy in the nursery, peered curiously from the hallway. Elizabeth arrived with a car seat and a quiet, steady presence. There was no fanfare, no big declarations. Just a moment. Anna lifted Lucy into her arms one last time, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." Lucy clung to her for a few seconds before Anna passed her to Elizabeth. She didn't cry. She didn't fight. She simply nestled into Elizabeth's shoulder, as if she had known all along that this was where she belonged. Anna walked them to the door, standing beside Maggie as they watched Elizabeth strap Lucy into the car. The baby blinked up at her, quiet but calm. "She's got this," Maggie murmured. Anna nodded. "She does." As the car pulled away, Anna let out a slow breath. The ache in her chest was familiar, but this time it wasn't bitter. Lucy had found her place. And somehow, despite everything, despite the way she had been left behind, she had been found again. The transition into her new home wasn't easy for Lucy. Elizabeth had expected that. Trust was not something that could be built overnight, especially for a child who had already learned in her short life that the people she relied on could disappear. On the first night, Lucy barely slept. She didn't cry, but she lay awake in the crib Elizabeth had carefully prepared for her, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. Every time Elizabeth checked on her, she found Lucy in the same position, motionless as if waiting. Elizabeth sat beside the crib, her hand resting lightly on the baby's back, offering warmth and reassurance without forcing too much contact. Eventually, Lucy's breathing slowed, her small body relaxing into sleep. But even in rest, her fingers twitched as if grasping for something unseen. Elizabeth knew this would take time. Days turned into weeks, and the patterns of their lives began to form. Mornings were quiet. Lucy was cautious, always watching before reacting, always studying before engaging. Elizabeth moved slowly, speaking in soft tones, making sure Lucy felt safe. At first, Lucy wouldn't take a bottle unless Elizabeth was holding her. Even when she was in her high chair, her wide, searching eyes followed Elizabeth's every move, as if afraid she would vanish the moment she looked away. Then there were the nights. Some nights were calm. Lucy would drift off with only a few restless movements. Other nights, she woke up crying, her small hands clenched in tight fists, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Elizabeth would scoop her up, holding her close, whispering softly until the tension in Lucy's body eased. It was a slow process, but eventually something shifted. The first time Lucy reached for Elizabeth without hesitation, it caught her off guard. It was early one morning, the house still quiet, the first rays of sunlight spilling through the window. Elizabeth had just finished making coffee when she turned to see Lucy, standing unsteadily by the couch, her small arms outstretched. Elizabeth froze for a moment, surprised. Then she stepped forward and picked Lucy up. The baby sighed, nestling into her shoulder, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric of Elizabeth's sweater. Elizabeth closed her eyes. They had turned a corner. Meanwhile, across town, James was thriving. Caroline and Tom Harris had settled into parenthood as if they had been born for it. Their home, warm and filled with laughter, quickly became the center of James's world. Unlike Lucy, James had no trouble adjusting. He was a happy baby, always quick to smile, always eager to be held. He giggled when Tom lifted him into the air, when Caroline pressed kisses to his chubby cheeks. Every milestone was met with celebration. The first time he rolled over, Caroline had clapped her hands in excitement. When he started babbling, Tom recorded every second. They adored him. And James, in turn, soaked up their love without hesitation. By the time he turned one, he was already walking, his small legs unsteady but determined. He had favorite toys, favorite foods. He had a family that cherished him. He would never remember the night he had been left in front of Angel's Haven. He would never know the fear of being unwanted. His past had faded into something distant, something that no longer mattered. But Lucy carried her past with her. The first time James and Lucy saw each other again, they didn't recognize each other. It happened by coincidence, nearly 2 years after they had left the shelter. Elizabeth had taken Lucy to a community playgroup, hoping to help her interact with other children. Lucy was still hesitant around strangers, still slow to trust, but Elizabeth wanted to give her the chance to explore, to feel safe in new spaces. The playroom was filled with bright colors, scattered toys, the sounds of small voices chattering. Lucy clung to Elizabeth's leg at first, her fingers gripping tightly, her dark eyes scanning the unfamiliar space. "It's okay," Elizabeth murmured, crouching beside her. "We're just here to play." Lucy hesitated, then let go, stepping cautiously toward a pile of soft blocks. Elizabeth stayed close, watching, her heart swelling with quiet pride as Lucy slowly started to explore. Then, across the room, a boy's laugh rang out. Elizabeth turned, and her breath caught. James. She recognized him immediately. He was bigger now, his once babyish features giving way to the early signs of childhood. His blonde hair was slightly tousled, his cheeks flushed from play. Caroline stood nearby, smiling as she watched him. He was happy. James turned, spotting Lucy. For a moment, there was nothing. Just two children, staring at each other. Then James grinned. He ran toward her, his small hands reaching for a toy. "Here," he said excitedly, holding it out to her. Lucy blinked. She didn't take it. James tilted his head, confused. He tried again, pushing the toy closer. "Here," he repeated. Elizabeth held her breath, watching. Lucy looked at the toy, then at James. And for a second, something flickered in her expression. Not recognition, she was too young to remember, but something else, a feeling, a connection that had no name, no explanation. Slowly, hesitantly, Lucy reached out and took the toy from his hands. James grinned wider, as if that was all he needed. He sat down beside her, chattering happily, as if they had always known each other. And Lucy, for the first time in her life, didn't pull away. Elizabeth felt something deep in her chest, something that almost made her knees weak. They didn't know, but somehow they knew. Caroline caught Elizabeth's gaze from across the room, recognition dawning in her eyes. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice soft with wonder. They were the babies from Angel's Haven. Elizabeth nodded. Neither of them spoke for a moment, watching as James babbled happily to Lucy, who listened with a cautious interest. Two lives, two paths that had once been the same. They had been left together. Now they had been found again. The years passed, and life moved forward. James and Lucy grew up in their separate homes, their childhoods unfolding in different ways, their worlds shaped by the families that had taken them in. They had met briefly in that playroom, but they were too young to remember, too young to understand the weight of that moment. James had a life filled with laughter, adventure, and certainty. He was an outgoing child, confident in the love of his parents, secure in the warmth of his home. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and had a natural charm that drew people to him. Caroline and Tom adored him, and he adored them back. He never questioned where he belonged. He had never needed to. Lucy's life was different. She had a mother who loved her deeply, but trust had never come easily for her. Elizabeth was patient, always providing the stability Lucy needed, never forcing affection, always waiting for her to take the first step. And she did, eventually. She began to trust, began to love, but the fear never truly left her. It sat in the back of her mind, a quiet whisper reminding her that things could change, that safety was something that could be taken away. Elizabeth saw it in the way Lucy clung to routine, in the way she hesitated before speaking, in the way she observed new people carefully before deciding whether to engage. She was bright, perceptive, but always cautious. Even as she grew older, even as she became more confident, there was a guardedness to her that never fully disappeared. She never asked about her past, and Elizabeth never pushed her to. Then, one day, everything changed. Lucy was 15 the first time she saw James again. She had been standing in line at a cafe waiting for her order when she heard laughter from across the room. It was loud, carefree, the kind of laugh that drew attention without trying. Something about it made her turn. Across the cafe, a group of teenagers sat around a table, talking and joking. One of them, a boy with tousled blonde hair and an easy grin, was at the center of it. He was leaning back in his chair, hands gesturing as he spoke, his voice animated. There was something about him that felt familiar, though Lucy couldn't place it. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he turned and met her eyes. For a moment, everything else faded. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Then recognition flickered in his expression, not complete understanding, but something close to it. His brow furrowed slightly, his smile faltering for just a second. Lucy felt something shift inside her. It wasn't memory. She didn't remember him, but she knew him. Before she could process what was happening, her name was called for her order. She turned away, grabbing her drink, forcing herself to focus. When she glanced back, the boy, James, was still watching her, curiosity in his eyes. She left the cafe without saying a word. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the strange pull in her chest. It wasn't like her to dwell on strangers, but he hadn't felt like a stranger. Days passed, then weeks, and she tried to forget about it. But the moment lingered, sitting at the edge of her thoughts, refusing to fade. Then, by pure coincidence, it happened again. She was at a school event, standing with a few friends, when she heard his voice. This time, she knew it before she even turned around. James. He was across the gym, laughing with his friends, but the second she saw him, something inside her clicked into place. And this time, he saw her too. He didn't hesitate. He excused himself from his group and walked toward her, his expression shifting from curiosity to something more certain. "Hey," he said, stopping in front of her. Lucy stared at him. "Hey." Up close, she could see the details she hadn't noticed before. The slight dimple in his cheek when he smiled, the familiar shade of his eyes, the way he carried himself with the kind of ease she had never possessed. "Do I know you?" he asked. The question sent a shiver down her spine, because she wanted to say yes. She wanted to say, "We were left together. We were found together. We shared something before we even had names." But she didn't. Instead, she shook her head. "I don't think so." James studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Okay," he said. But there was something in his tone, something that told her he didn't believe her. And maybe she didn't believe herself either. They crossed paths more after that, not often, but enough. Enough for him to smile at her in the hallways, enough for her to notice the way he always seemed to be looking when she wasn't. They weren't friends, not yet, but something was there. Then, one evening, Elizabeth came into the living room holding an old folder. "I think it's time," she said. Lucy frowned. "Time for what?" Elizabeth hesitated. "I know you've never asked about your past, and I never wanted to push you, but I think you should see this." She placed the folder on the coffee table. It was worn, the edges frayed from years of being handled. Lucy stared at it. She knew what was inside. She wasn't sure she was ready. Elizabeth didn't say anything else. She simply sat down beside her, waiting, letting Lucy decide. After a long moment, Lucy reached out and opened the folder. Inside were documents, hospital records, papers from the night she had been found, photographs from when she had first arrived at Angel's Haven, and a name. James Harris. Her breath caught. The cafe, the school event, the strange familiarity she had felt. It wasn't a coincidence. She turned to Elizabeth, her heart pounding. "Did you know?" Elizabeth's expression was gentle. "I suspected. But I wanted you to figure it out in your own time." Lucy swallowed. She looked back down at the name. James. The boy she had met without meeting. The boy who had been a part of her life before she even knew what life was. And for the first time, the question that had always lingered in the back of her mind, the quiet whisper of doubt that had never left her, finally had an answer. She had never been alone, not really, and now she had a choice. Did she tell him? Did she let him know that they had started this life together, Or did she keep walking past him, pretending they were strangers, knowing that they never really had been? She closed the folder, her hands trembling. She had to decide. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories. Check out our other videos for more, and feel free to share this one with others. Thanks for watching.